It's called Jobifying. Jobefying. Jobifying. So hopefully that will be spelled correctly in the hard-coded captions of this video from now on. I prefer to have this available and very visible and readable in any environment, even if you prefer complete silence. That is why I do that. I consider that to be like one of the things that all podcasts with a video form should do if you're going to go, especially if you're one of those podcasts that keep going over an hour. It's not like a hard rule, but that's considered a standard for podcasts that have more than one person. I'm just one person, though, so that standard is to try and have this wrapped up by the 40-minute mark. So, hey there, freaks and sickos. Welcome to the podcasts. Jobifying. So, what is that? It sounds like something I should be familiar with. Is what most people are going to think at this very moment. But Jobifying, if you have gone to church more than 10 times in your life, you already know where this is heading. And if you're an evangelical Protestant, you probably feel a pit in your stomach, and it has nothing to do with your religion and everything to do with how hard and fast you're willing to exploit its lesson. So there is a perfect theologic consistency and framework behind why it's okay to positively appropriate the Bible this way and inform the entire world about why Jobifying is a universal wrong that no one should do, whether they're religious or not. And it is a specific pattern of behavior that you need to avoid as quickly as you sense it. For those of you who are not familiar, Job is the guy in the Bible that had faith in God and defended that by a very extreme length that nobody watching this, don't you dare try and convince me otherwise in any way except the comment section. But other than that, none of you would be willing to put up with. All right? Jobifying is when someone who is not God tries to do that outside of that story and in the current time. And recent history has a lot of horrific examples of Jobifying going very wrong. There was a lot of that 50 years ago. There was a somehow milder form of that in the Victorian era. Jobifying is a bad thing to do, and it is a very powerful tool used by very bad people. I'm talking worst part of the German timeline bad. Jobifying is when somebody tries to replace your scrutiny, your sense of scrutiny, your instinct to show some scrutiny to somebody with optimism. Like, all right, so it's gonna suck for a bit. But if you keep going down this path, I assure you, you will get 20 Tritos per Trito you are asking of me now. That kind of behavior. And some parts of Silicon Valley do this. Not all, but there are a lot of startups who Jobify the value of their company to investors who do not understand what the company is really worth and could be worth. OpenAI probably Jobified Microsoft, and we're going to find out sometime this year that they're going to need to dial back the expectations of guess engines like ChatGPT, Gemini, and DeepSeek. I'm not saying they're useless. I'm saying what value they can actually make, especially where they're being pushed the hardest, is greatly exaggerated. So companies Jobify, people Jobify. There are companies who Jobify people to trick them into getting jobs that are extremely exploitative. Jobifying is used to get H-1B visa holders a taste of the American dream while abusing them. And they can't do anything about it, even though every day showing up to work makes them very sick to their stomach because they work for X.com. Jobifying is a bad thing used by bad people to try to convince you that they're not bad. It's a bad behavior that we are capable as a species of stopping. It's extremely unnatural and gross, but somehow people keep doing that. Jobifying is something that Andrew Tate does. And I'm really glad he's not on this platform. I hope he finds this video anyway. Because yes, Andrew Tate, I am accusing you of Jobifying. Jobifying is a noted pattern of abuse, and that needs to stop. Like, it's something that no man should ever fall for. And Andrew Tate loves the fact that men who really just need self-respect, and that's it, are falling for Andrew Tate's bullshit. And Jobifying can even be found in certain kinds of bigotry or just letting heinous things slide. Okay, so this god-awful thing my company in Switzerland is doing is just something no moral person can allow to continue. But maybe if I let it continue today, there will be 20 virtues in 10 years. Jobifying is something used by some very faulty logic that you can find on lesswrong.org or whatever that site is. That basis behind an accelerationist agenda that is starting to tilt to the side and is about to crash. Jobifying is when you tell the people for a paycheck to follow advice that you yourself absolutely do not follow yourself, Mr. Waters. And say to your viewers, yeah, these tariffs, they will lead to stronger men in a more masculine economy. That was like the 50s. You lying sack of shit. The 50s had tariffs, but there were smart people who made them. And there was a sign at the time that there was chatter already that we should probably move more towards free trade as the world starts to move in a more free market direction. There was a lot of chatter of doing that and how to do that with varying perspectives on all sides of the political spectrum, but nonetheless, that was the trend people were seeing even at that time. So no, Mr. Waters, you cannot Jobify that past to justify where you want to go when in that past they knew where they were going anyway, and it was the opposite direction anyway. The one that free trade, it was towards free trade. Even the people in the 50s knew there was going to be more free trade in the future. Seriously, you all can look that up. I'm not Jobifying. I'm not just trying to send you down some research hole. I mean, you can trust me if you want, but I'm not going to ask you to have infinite faith. And that's the difference between being Jobified and having real trust. I'm trusting you to keep your trust in me. I'm not going to go to extreme lengths to force it out of people, unless you're in the way and I need to move past you. Yeah, I do that in public a lot, and not sorry, but beyond that, Jobifying is just a horrendous thing to do. And that's not even Jobifying, it's just get out of the way. Jobifying is a horrendous, indefensible behavior that people should not do anymore. There is a perfectly sound theological framework because, it's even in Genesis, be fruitful. That strongly implies that the resources that people make should go out far and wide. That's a fruitful society. Kleptocracy is not. But kleptocrats like to Jobify and try and get as many suckers optimistic enough to handle just one more beating by an abusive authority figure. And there's really no way to rationalize that that's not an abusive thing to do. If there was a reason that 1984 happened in the world of 1984, as written by George Orwell, it wasn't really mentioned anywhere in the book, but the tone of the parts of the book that explained what led up to the book, the events of the book, it does everything it can to explain itself as thoroughly as possible. So, yeah, that's 1984. That's why it is my favorite book of all time, above the Bible. But in any case, there had to have been some Jobifying involved to get Big Brother to rise to power. Like, anyone like that, any horrible, horrible leader that you absolutely would not want anywhere near you in your life, your friends, your family, and even your enemies, that terrifying, there has to be Jobifying involved. Whether it is the authoritarian right with the worst part of the German timeline, I think they relaxed that, but still, I don't know what the rules are going to be here on YouTube for day to day. You know what I'm talking about there. The authoritarian right in Italy with Mussolini. Jobifying was involved in allowing that to happen at all. If Jobifying was seen at the time as a universal wrong, then the people would have been more skeptical, more than enough in enough places to make sure that never happened, to ask just enough questions. Like, hey, I know you're saying there's this inevitable victory, but can you please provide evidence of why that is the case? I mean, at least before the Civil War, the North had enough intuition to go through with it, right? But then there's other then there's evil people who are like, yeah, we're going to have the vibe and the chest beating and we're strong. I'm going to appeal to your feeling of strength without really doing anything to make it grow, really. We're going to do that. I'm going to Jobify, and I'm not going to explain why I think there is an inevitable victory when we can look back now and understand that this is a case for defeat every time it is tried. But Jobifying has to be involved there. There's countries like... I'm going to give you the most horrible example of all time. Cambodia. I think it's Cambodia. But yeah, the Khmer Rouge regime. Khmer Rouge, or however you pronounce that. Pol Pot had to use Jobifying to get into power too. The Kim dynasty, exact same thing. Jobifying is a tool that abusers have to use to even start doing that. And I think it's time that as a world of self-respecting people, we all deserve that. Even if we did bad things in the past. As a world where everyone needs to have self-respect in your life, I think we should all have the moral foundation and framework to say, hey, are you really trying to do something good here? Or are you Jobifying to steal from us, to take from us, to exploit us way beyond what is necessary? Are you Jobifying, or are you on to something more serious and asking for that proof, demanding that evidence in advance? And you don't have to be a religious person to understand that. But it's a theological framework, and it's also a very good, common sense wisdom for everyone type of thing. Don't let people Jobify you, okay? The only person that should be allowed to Jobify, should there be evidence of that person's existence, is, of course, Yahweh, Jehovah, God, Jesus, same dude. That's it. And if you're anyone else, it still makes sense. The word makes sense. I made a positive cultural thing out of the Bible for everyone, no matter their faith. That's the kind of thing that led to some really good shit in history, if I must be honest, like ending slavery. Sure, some of slavery's fiercest opponents this year are atheists, but you know what? In American history, it's more of a thing Christians can take credit for. And ending the Jobifying, ending the practice of trying to replace people's sense of a healthy dose of skepticism with optimism. Dark optimism, a kind that the abuser knows in advance they're not going to fulfill, to string people along and make them okay. With being hurt by Jobifiers. That's got to stop. And if I, an atheist, have to feed that win to religious people just to make that shit stop, then so be it. Yeah, I invented the word Jobify. Yeah, I'm an atheist. But that doesn't make it wrong to talk about in your churches. Because anyone, as an atheist, I know, I really look into the worldview of all religions. That's the paradox of atheism for you. But I digress. As an atheist, I am begging churches to try and understand and communicate in sermons, hey, yeah, this Job guy, and the spelling should be changed. I mean, I gave you 3 names for the same God in the entire history of the English language. So yeah, it's okay to rename Job from J-O-B to J-O-B-E. Nothing wrong with that at all. Related, Jobifying. You can have the theological discussion of that in church. I encourage it. And I think that the secular community and scientists should also do studies on this. Even kids at the science fair can do some kind of horrific AI psychological experiment on their friends, collect data, and say, these are the kinds of people, these are the controls and the variables of my science show experiment on the response by people to Jobifying. I got this Discord bot into 100 people in a large chat. I hashed their identities. Here's the spreadsheet. Here's the findings. Here's the chart. It's something for everyone to think about. That the abusive practice of Jobifying is the mother of all abuse. As humans, as a species, we can completely do without that and be more fruitful. And for everyone watching this, I consider that a win. What's the problem? Oh, an atheist thought of this first. Oh, well, who cares? If religious people can make good out of it, who cares? Especially the most popular religion, if you combine all the Catholic, Protestants, other branches together, the dominant religion of the world can just look back in their Bible and go, oh yeah, this is the story of Job. It's spelled J-O-B-E now, so I'm just going to correct that with the pen. Also, yeah, this is a very messed up story. I can understand why people have a problem being treated this way by other people. I can see that there could be a difference between other people doing this to people and Yahweh Jehovah God doing this to people. You know, that's where I'm gonna have to live. That's what I'm gonna have to live with, right? Like the knowledge that I made a word for a pattern of abuse that somehow is the oldest trick in the Tyrant playbook and somehow still works to this day. People got to be smarter than that. People got to have more self-respect than that. People got to stand up to this nonsense. And they are. Like, they're all of 210 in Brainerd filled with these people who are like, no, Mr. President, I'm done being Jobified here. When is my standard of living going to go up? I know what you did now, and I'm not going to let this Jobifying continue. I want answers. The people deserve answers if you're going to play, if you're going to dance around like a 5-year-old in the White House and just change your mind from minute to minute on what our trade policy should be. You know, only Jobifying could lead to how things are in America and the world now. Only with Jobifying, which I would argue really started with Ronald Reagan. Only with Jobifying would I be at the point in the year 2025 saying really unimaginable in 1999 as someone who lived in that year, very fun year, 1999, 1998. Everything that America is now completely unimaginable to those people, and they would think it's nuts, and they would freak out bad. Only Jobifying could let something like the way America is today happen, and it cannot continue. And we are strong. Every human being, even Elon Musk, is strong enough to stand up against the practice of Jobifying, if they so choose. Like, what's wrong with being an actual hero? I'm serious. But yeah, we got to stop with the scamming, making of suckers. Jobifying is used in those Nigerian prince scams, in people falling for spam emails. There are certain groups of people who are more susceptible to it than others. And there are ways to attempt to force that abuse enabling onto people, like gaslighting could precede Jobifying, but usually it's the other way around. People need to know what to expect from you up front as much as possible. And my autistic view of the world is really upset that we can't really do that. And Minnesota especially makes that very hard. Makes people very hard to read. There are people who will mumble things that that would not fly at normal volume. I consider Minnesota nice in general to be an ableist thing to do if you're doing that to someone who is autistic, and someone who is autistic could very much try and see if you're being even more shitty with your passive aggression by, seeing if you're following it up with Jobifying or gaslighting or denying that complete 180, like I did not do that with a straight face when I know you did that type of shit. And it's got to stop. It's all got to stop. I mean, I understand passive aggression. I understand why some people would be so annoyed as to break at the fact that I stare at a clock in the hallway as to break it. But practice some self-restraint. And that's also the key to hitting the brakes on Jobifying, of trying to put faith in people in something that is very much off a cliff for their own gain. That is Jobifying. It's not the story of Job, it's Jobifying. It's making abuse by reverse engineering this story. that the Bible, in way more explicit words than I have said in the video, is not an okay thing to do. Together, we can stop Jobifying. Together, we can have the patience to squabble over what part, what facet, what angle of society can actually take credit for it. But you heard it here first in this video. It is the oldest one that you could have possibly heard it from. And as always, if you enjoyed that take, I'm sure it resonates with so many people right now. Subscribe if you like, and share if you care. I'm not going to be the first to use that term in an actual conversation. I'm okay with that, though.